Hello. Today we're going to see how the out-of-the-box Azure collector works in Ceph1, allowing us to collect the most relevant data from this cloud. In this demo, we will show how Ceph1 monitors Azure services from a single console, providing visibility to the infrastructure and network elements of hybrid cloud environments, in particular, in this case, from Azure Cloud. The story behind this demo is that there is a company that is migrating services from on-prem to the cloud, and even though they have an existing APM solution, an application performance monitoring solution, that is monitoring the virtual machines running in the cloud, there are still some communication issues that are not detected by that solution. With Ceph1, we will provide a comprehensive view of all the network services in Azure that will make sure that the transition from the cloud, from on-prem to the cloud, is successful, and the performance of the new cloud services are kept stable in the future. Ceph1 is able to collect all the network data, and that means that we can monitor on-prem networks as well as cloud networks. And this is something that we can see from this report, the Hybrid Multi-Cloud Report, where we can see data from different clouds in a single report. So we can see things like gateways, VPN connections, direct connects, CPU, memory. As we can see from here, we can see networks from AWS, from Azure, even from IBM Cloud, as well as Google Cloud, in a single report. However, in this demo, we want to focus on all the data that we can capture from Azure. So let's have a look at the Azure reports that we have in Ceph1. So we can see that in this section, there is a specific section for Azure reports, where we can see the out-of-the-box reports that we have available when we install Ceph1. And here we can see a lot of information that we can use straight away. Something relevant to mention is that yes, we can monitor virtual machines and scale sets, as well as other solutions, but in Ceph1 what we want to do is focus on those network elements linked to cloud providers. Things like load balancers, like virtual network gateways, like direct connects, and so on. And as we can see here, yes, we can monitor virtual machines. You can see the list of VMs that we're running. We can see the list here. We can see we can filter by location. And we go through the sections here, we can see all the relevant metrics that we're collecting from this particular section. Things like CPU, memory, disk, or even network stats, as we can see here. Also, we can collect data not only from virtual machines, we can collect data from scale sets. So if we go to the other section, we can see these are scale sets, and we can see similar information, things like network stats, CPU, memory, disk, and availability. And if we go to another section, we can see, for example, CPU as well. If we want to focus into more specific network data, we could focus on this report, that is the Azure Load Balancers. We can see the load balancer main KPIs that we can collect from Azure. Things like traffic, we can see here with packet count, sync count, number of people trying to connect, or things like, for example, the status of the VIP, as we can see here, as well as some other advanced statistics. As well, we can collect data from virtual networks. So, for example, here on this other report, we can see the actual gateway statistics, things like bytes, drops. We can also see important things like bytes as well as some other information like we can see here, top traffic, top flows, and as well we can see the actual CPU used from the gateways. And just to show that we can collect also data from lots of other places, for example, from storage accounts, we can get a lot of information from different types of storage. We can see the blob storage, we can see the file storage, we can see the queue storage, table storage. All this one will give you different relevant data. All of these can be captured by Ceph1, as we can see on these reports. So as you can see, we're getting a lot of depth of data that we're collecting from the cloud environment, allowing us to have all this relevant information from different sources, and even as we've seen before, from different clouds in a single solution. Also, something very interesting is this out-of-the-box report called Microsoft Azure Dashboard, where you can see all the relevant data that we're collecting from these different network elements from Azure in a single report. things like CPU of the virtual machines, network, memory, all these kind of things. Not only from virtual machines, we can get information from load balancers, as we can see here. Same information that we've seen before, but in a different report. Connectivity with the gateways, the VPNs, and all this relevant information. And something very interesting as well that we have available on this report is this Azure status. From here, we're going to be able to connect to the Azure status page and see the actual status of the services running in Azure. This is the integration that we have with an external website. As you can see, we can see from the actual report. We don't need to get away from the report. We can see all this data from the same report that we have the rest of the data. Very interesting. But as you possibly know, in SEV1 we believe that collecting data is very important, but analyzing the data is also very, very relevant. We need to understand the context. We need to understand the meaning of that data. So for example, if I go to one of these KPIs, let's go to the load balancers, let's go to one of the KPIs that we have here, for example, byte count. I want to understand whether this is something normal or not, because I can see some spikes, but I can see the metric is quite low. So in order to give me some context of the real meaning of this data, what I can do is go to the data analytics workspace that will allow me to understand and analyze in real time the meaning of these metrics. And actually I can see that the dotted line, that is the actual behavior, is quite low. This is the expected behavior of this KPI. And when I compare it with the actual behavior, I can see that these spikes is not something normal. We have lots of different ways to analyze data. We have things like time over time, for example, compare this week with last week, and actually can see they will also have some spikes, not always, and sometimes are smaller. There is like a little drift on the time. Maybe it's like a 15-minute drift between what happened this week and last week. We also have trends, percentiles, projections based on this trend. When is the metric is going to look in the future? And also one of the reports I like the most is the calendar heat map that will help me understand if there is any pattern on the behavior. And I can see that actually, yes, it's true that we have some spikes. Actually, I can see these peaks here, but these peaks are kind of randomly allocated. There is some kind of frequency, but it's not always at the same time. So with this information, it's going to be much easier for me to understand if something is normal, not normal, if there is a problem or not. Just with these analytics that are applied in real time, that are available for any kind of metric. As soon as you can collect a metric, we're going to analyze this data and understand the normal behavior. However, sometimes we don't want to analyze the data in real time. Sometimes we want to compare the data with other metrics. This is something also that we can do in SEV1 with our flexible reports. So now, instead of analyzing the data, I don't want to analyze this metric. I want to compare this metric. I want to visually correlate this metric with different metrics from either this domain or different domains. This is something that we can do from the Instant Graph workspace. So from here, I will open this report, and now I can choose which other metrics I want to put into context. So for example, from the same device, I want to get more data from this particular object, and for example, I'm gonna correlate it with the scene count. With one click, I can easily see if there is any relationship between this metric or this other metric. And this is something that you can do from any kind of device. So for example, I'm going to select one of the VMs that we have running in Azure. I'm going to select one of the metrics. For example, let's go for CPU, and also visually correlate this metric together. And you can see that actually there is a little spike here, but nothing correlates these metrics together. So with a few clicks and in seconds, we have managed to put into context different metrics from different sources in a single report, allowing me to visually correlate and understand better the meaning of these metrics. So, as we have seen, SEV1 is able to collect data from different cloud providers. In this case, we have checked Azure, collect all the relevant data, analyze this data in order to give us some context and meaning of this data, and allows us to use either the out-of-the-box reports as well as create our own reports using these flexible reporting capabilities in order to understand better and faster the meaning of these metrics and proactively detect issues and avoid any outage potential outage that we have in the cloud. Thank you.